How does an immortal being deal with death? Welcome to the Immortal Gifts Podcast, where Dave Robison, Veronica Giguerre, and J Daniel Sawyer read my novel, Immortal Gifts, to you. I'm Catherine Filliard, and I wrote this. This episode of the Immortal Gifts Podcast is sponsored by me. If you like the podcast, tell your friends. If you've run out of friends to tell, buy the book. It's available in ebook, paperback, hardcover, large print, and audio. I also have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, if that's your thing. Impatient? The audiobook is available at my shop and my Patreon and will be headed to all the places audiobooks are sold. And with that, on to the show.
Ludwig's Tale. Ludwig, Berlin, Prussia, May 28th, 1840. I attended a concert at the Academy of Music, late because I had to wait until after sunset. My footsteps echoed on the beige stone floors despite my attempt to be quiet, but no one appeared to notice. The violinist was a lovely young man with the androgynous beauty of an angel, neither completely male nor completely female. His thick dark hair fell into his face. When he played, he sometimes closed his doe-like eyes in bliss, and it was simultaneously profoundly spiritual and like the descriptions I've heard of carnal ecstasy. I felt like he'd permitted me to see something intimate, not in a crude way, but as a gift. I approached him after the concert while he was talking with a teacher from the school, a stern-looking, older man. I bowed and introduced myself. "Do you have a patron?" He smiled shyly. "I do not." He spoke with a gentle voice and had a thoughtful quality. There was nothing of the vulgarity of some performers about him. "Tell me about your financial situation." He bit his lip. My tuition is paid. I used an inheritance from my grandfather. My parents gave me money for an apartment, and it's enough to cover my rent." He smiled. "As long as I don't eat extravagantly." "So, better than some, worse than others." I pulled out my purse and counted out some coins and handed them to him. He thanked me and bowed. "What is your full name?" His eyes darted around the room, and he stammered, Abraham Brown?" I laughed. "Are you certain?" He chewed on a fingernail and stared at the floor. Finally, he admitted quietly, "I'm a convert." His teacher patted his shoulder, comforting and fatherly, and walked away to talk to another student. "Oh!" I blinked and considered this. I'd never actually met a Jew before. I patted his shoulder comfortingly, much like his teacher had. "I'm glad you told me." He shuffled his feet, appearing miserable. A flush colored his tawny, pale skin. I leaned closer. "Am I making you uncomfortable?" He blushed and nodded. "Well, we will speak no more of it," I said. "Forgive me, I can be, well, we will speak no more of it." I was never good at dealing with people. "I'm not offended," he said, but his cheeks were very red. "Do you feel able to play a little more for me, or are you too fatigued?" "I can play." I led him back to my home, to my drawing room, and gestured for him to play. He took out his violin and played, and without the other instruments it was even more sublime. I'm a harsh critic. I have supernaturally enhanced hearing and trained for music early in my life, but the sound was luxurious, like the rarest silks and velvets, colorful and bright like a stained glass window, rich and heady and addictive like the finest wine. This was a beauty that would haunt my dreams. He finished, and I sat there breathless. He glanced up at me with his huge, soft, dark eyes and asked, "Did my playing please you?" I huffed out a quiet laugh. "It was transcendent." He smiled, a genuine flattered smile, and for a second my heart stopped. I pulled out my purse and handed him more coins. "Come back tomorrow," I said. He blinked in surprise, but all he said was, "If you like." Ludwig, Berlin, Prussia, May 29th, 1840, to February 10th, 1841. Abraham came back the next night, and the next. I couldn't get enough. I had found the recipient for my first gift of immortality. I wanted to ensure that this wonderful young man could play for me long after his contemporaries had died. No one was more deserving of the gift. I told Thomas that I had someone whom I intended to make one of us, and he said he wanted to meet this person. I told him that Abraham was a brilliant musician, but as to his being a convert, Thomas didn't need to know everything. Sadly, Abraham's father was deathly ill, and Abraham had rushed home. I waited patiently for over 2 months for him to return so I could offer him eternal life. His playing the evening of his return was magnificent, as always, although he appeared a little pale and needed a haircut. And to be honest, I liked his hair long. Once his bow touched the strings, I barely avoided weeping at his music. His exquisite playing was a tangible thing, like a wave, like a brush of fingers. That was lovely. You're very gifted. Abraham bowed. I'm glad I pleased you, Baron. Abraham coughed, and his handkerchief filled with blood. He still managed to put his violin away. He coughed again. There was so much blood that it escaped and dripped between his fingers, trailing down his arm to the elbow and onto the carpet. The scent of it was intoxicating, but I knew what it meant. Consumption. Consumption and death. My family raised me knowing that a nobleman, a leader, must sometimes make the difficult decision. I wasn't Abraham's baron, his Freiherr, but I saw no reason to let him die. Quite the contrary. So I bit him. I took him in my arms as if he were my bride, and buried my teeth in his neck. My lips brushed the soft skin in what was almost, but not quite, a kiss. He was delicious despite the consumption. Sweeter, more subtle, more complex than the finest wine. What I purchased at the butcher's was swill next to this. He was warm and yielding, or perhaps too ill to fight me off. I was determined that he wouldn't suffer during the transformation. I drank until he passed out, then gently lowered him to the floor. I brushed his overlong hair out of his eyes, bit my wrist. I dripped my blood into his unconscious mouth, pressing my wrist to his pale lips, trusting his instinct to swallow. Thomas watched, impassive. I remembered convulsing when I turned, but Abraham merely kicked weakly and shuddered. His transition was quick and gentle. He must have been very ill. I'd turned him just in time. When he awakened, I said, I'm afraid you're going to need to forgive me, Abraham. I couldn't bear the thought of the world losing your talent. What? He blinked his beautiful eyes at me. Well, I said, it was presumptuous of me, but I've cured your consumption. Surely he'd be pleased that I'd saved his life. He sat up and felt his neck as I had done. I don't understand. Of course you don't. At least I didn't think he'd guessed my nature. It's all right, my dear boy. You know how through transubstantiation wine becomes the literal blood of our Lord Jesus? He nodded. The cost of the cure is that you need to drink more literal blood. He still didn't seem to understand. How much blood do I have to drink? Finally I resorted to, I've made you a vampire, you silly boy. And then he asked for a glass of water, of all things, as if that would do him any good. I rang the bell for the maid, with whom I had a financial relationship regarding my dietary needs. I've never cared for hunting. Greta, offer your wrist to Abraham. I don't understand, he repeated. I offered him Greta's wrist. He drank, but not as much as I would have liked. But he also cried. Thomas grimaced, and despite feeling more sympathetic, I had to agree with Thomas's dismay. This was not how I had pictured this going. I'd pictured welcoming Abraham into a new vampire family, moving him into my home. I'd pictured him being grateful that I'd saved his life. It's all right, silly boy. See? She's fine, and so are you. I rhapsodized about the role of blood in art and liturgy, but he merely looked dismayed. I was finally driven to adding, Please tell me you're not a reformer. And then he destroyed everything with a couple of sentences. I'm a Jew. We don't drink blood. Thomas hissed and crossed himself. I felt like the floor was falling away from my feet. You told me you converted. I lied, he admitted. I just wanted to attend the academy. He'd lied. I'm going to ask you to leave and never return, I sighed. Still, I'm glad that the world didn't lose your gift with the violin. You're just going to let him leave? Thomas asked. I closed my eyes. Thomas would harm him, kill him. Thomas would destroy his gift. I couldn't allow that. I took a deep breath and said, "Yes." Abraham gathered up his violin, thanked us, and left. I think he grasped the danger he faced. Thomas said, "The gift of eternal life is only for those who believe, and whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die." "That's a spiritual reference, not a reference to our kind," I said. Thomas had proved that by pretending to be a cleric and murdering a priest. He was a poor excuse for a Christian. "There cannot be a Jewish vampire," Thomas said. "My family died of plague. My grandmother's family all gone. She was the only survivor, only to die of the Black Death a generation later, along with my parents. We all know the plague was a Jewish plot caused by poisoned wells. They all confessed under torture. They always do. And you would make a Jew an immortal? I didn't know. Go to his lodgings and bring him back." He made the marionette-controlling gesture at me. I had no idea where he lived. He'd always come to me. I probably could have found him, but I clung to the technicality and stood still, blankly staring at him while inwardly sighing in relief. "It's been over 300 years, and I still have the charm my grandmother gave me to protect me from witches. It's all I have left of her. Do you know what I went through in the hospital for orphan children? I was better off in the streets. There cannot be a Jewish vampire." I felt pity for his loss, but not enough that I would willingly find Abraham. It took a long time for him to release me. I told Thomas that I didn't think we could be friends anymore, and he agreed with insulting enthusiasm. Ludwig, Berlin, Prussia, February 11th, 1814, to March 26th, 1841. A rich, luxurious sound haunted my dreams, with memories of dark hair falling into huge dark eyes closing and lips parting in ecstasy as he played. The memory of his fingers caressing the strings of his violin pervaded my dreams, and I craved more. I attended other performances, saw other musicians, but no one had Abraham's gift. Worse, I was obsessed with his sad eyes as he left last time I saw him. I prayed for guidance. One night Greta came over to offer her wrist, but she was pale and smelled oddly. "Are you well?" "No, Baron, I am not." She swayed on her feet. "Well, I can't drink from you in this state," I said. "Why don't you rest, and we'll see how you feel in the morning." Thank you, Baron. I will do that." She wobbled off to her room and closed the door. I read and practiced piano all night, trying to take my mind off returning thoughts of a particular violinist. I wasn't completely successful, perhaps because I was just good enough at the piano to understand why I would never be great. My musical abilities were part of a nobleman's education, nothing more. I was also getting thirsty, so when Greta didn't come downstairs the next morning, I went to check on her. The first thing I noticed was the stench of the chamber pot. It was lying in the middle of the floor and had a vile, white, fishy-smelling substance in it. Her wash basin was full of a clear fluid that wasn't water. Greta was unmoving on the bed. Her eyes were open and sunken. The skin on her face and her hands was wrinkled, and she was most thoroughly dead. I wouldn't say that I considered Greta a friend, but her passing saddened me. I went downstairs to the bakery and asked them to please summon an undertaker and a priest, and to send a message and a small bequest to her younger sister Ingrid, of whom I knew she had been fond. Arranging Greta's funeral took most of the day, and I grew thirstier and thirstier. Night fell, and I was forced to go out hunting. As I've said, I don't enjoy hunting, but I dislike it enough that it bears repeating. I wandered out into the cold spring rain, looking for someone to bite. The butcher shops were closed, and I was getting dangerously thirsty. I found myself thinking of Abraham and the delicious taste of him. As I remembered, I found myself drawn to the underside of a bridge for reasons I didn't fully understand. It was dark and dirty and cluttered with old crates falling to pieces, but there was a golden glow peeking out of the shadows. There were fewer rats than expected at such a location. There was a dark figure beneath the bridge that might have been stalking me. It was Abraham, and further, he was the source of the golden glow, but only when I closed my eyes or concentrated. Was this the gift Thomas had promised so long ago? I was so relieved to see him, I babbled. "Play for me one last time, like you used to. Please, Abraham." He indulged me for whatever reason. He'd been gifted before, but the change! His new vampire senses, the speed of his fingers, it was richer than gold and gems, sweeter than honey, and clear and bright as the sun I haven't seen since the day Thomas turned me, sunlight sparkling on water. It was somehow both intensely spiritual and almost overwhelmingly sensual, and the grief of it! It was both crushingly sad and so astonishingly gorgeous that I felt like I'd seen and heard an angel. Tears streamed down my face, but I kept myself from sobbing aloud so I wouldn't miss a note. The sound drew even a colony of cats who sat at his feet, and his lips quirked up at the sight of them. I was mesmerized. As the notes faded away, I let a few sobs escape. I was trembling. I felt like I was waking up from a very sad dream. Finally I whispered, "Scheherazade, you could tempt me to stay here until dawn." "Why would I want to do that?" I laughed. Why indeed? I gave him everything I had on me, all my money, all my rings, my watch. I wished I had more. I handed him the purse, telling him, "Don't live under a bridge. You're destined for greater than this." He bowed, but it was an angry, sarcastic bow. Well, he probably believed I had wronged him. Had I? On the way home, there was a man smashing a glass window in front of a Jewish bakery, so I bit him and drank. I didn't kill him, and of course I didn't give him any of my own blood, so he would merely wake up in a dirty alleyway with a sore neck. Ludwig, Berlin, Prussia, May 12, 1841. I was so troubled by all this that I went to my priest and explained the situation, omitting vampirism, of course, and I asked him if he thought I had done the wrong thing in cutting ties with Abraham. We sat in his office in heavy chairs at a solid desk, surrounded by stone walls and a floor and aging carpet. Father Marcus was a young man with dark hair and thick glasses, and he leaned forward on his desk and focused as I spoke. "Well," Father Marcus said, "it depends on your conscience, and while it's unfortunate that your former protege now lives under a bridge, you aren't morally obligated to continue your patronage if you choose not to, although one should always strive to be charitable. That said, perhaps your violinist is a good Jew. They exist." I blinked. This wasn't an opinion that Thomas or anyone else had ever expressed to me. "If you would like to know more, I would recommend the work of Moses Mendelssohn. While I don't agree with his faith, his philosophical work is irrefutable, and he is reputed to have been a man of excellent character. If you haven't read his books, you should." I considered this. Do you think it would endanger my belief to do so?" Father Marcus smiled at me. "His works do not sway the reader to Judaism, although they do advocate for a better position for Jews in society. As to his thesis that the state has no right to interfere in the conscience of its citizens, well, if the crown tried to force you and me to become Protestants, we would agree, wouldn't we?" Yes, I would. The law that required all children of mixed Catholic and Protestant marriages to be raised as Protestants was bad enough. "Thank you," I said. I'm always pleased to have more books to read." "I hope that I've given you some comfort," Father Marcus said. I wasn't sure that was how I would have described it, but I smiled at him and stopped at a bookseller on my way home. Ludwig, Berlin, Prussia, May 28, 1841. Sadly, Mendelssohn's On the Civil Amelioration of the Condition of the Jews in Jerusalem did not ease my mind. Quite the contrary. Father Marcus was correct that Mendelssohn's work was irrefutable. A sample. Brothers, if you care for true piety, let us not feign agreement where diversity is evidently the plan and purpose of Providence. None of us thinks and feels exactly like his fellow man. Why do we wish to deceive each other with delusive words? Abraham had lied to me, but he had lied to attend an academy that would have barred his magnificent talent based on his faith. I believe that Abraham would have preferred to openly be the man he was with no dissembling. I played back our conversation repeatedly, remembering his blushing discomfort and what I now realized was his deep shame, much like the shame that I now felt. But not a shame that would permit me to miss a performance. He played publicly now, and I would always find him, always, and weep at the beauty. Both at the beauty of the music and at a possible beautiful friendship that prejudice had caused me to let slip from my fingers. After some years, he moved to London. There was nothing for it but for me to move to London as well. I refused to miss a single performance. Perhaps, eventually, I would find the courage to approach him.
You've been listening to the Immortal Gifts Podcast, and I'm your host and author, Catherine Villiard. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happened next, and please rate the podcast to help other people find it. See you next time, and remember, becoming a vampire is a thing that can just happen to you, but being a monster is a choice.